Hello there and welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. This is the second part of my Meng King Tiger build. In the last part of this kit I did the construction, refined some textures and added a bit of battle damage. In this part I will paint the camo scheme, add some basic weathering and also try to seriously paint the included figures. I hope you all enjoy. First I have to disassemble the model. This will make priming and painting later easier. Now I can cover everything with a layer of Patrikios Mica Primer Black. This will unify the surface and make any imperfections or gaps between the parts easier to fix. The primer is thinned with a few drops of flow improver. It should then dry for at least 24 hours before I can continue. For the base color I chose Patrikios dark yellow thinned with a little bit of flow improver. For an even coverage I need between 3 and 4 thin layers of paint. Working in thin layers helps to keep the details more visible and reduces the risk of the paint pooling. Like the black primer, I let the yellow layer dry for another 24 hours. For the camo, I will allow a little bit of artistic freedom. The hull will be painted similar to that shown in the instructions, while I will take inspiration from the Hobby Boss King Tiger for the turret. The turret will be split into 3 parts: a brown, a yellow and a green one. For that I mask off the areas I wanted to keep yellow. For the hull I will be using masking putty like I did on the Panther. The putty can simply be put onto the model and then transformed into the desired shape. If the paint underneath is completely dry, the putty should never damage it. And this is the finished masking. It's not one-to-one made from the instructions, but I referenced it to get a rough idea of the ratio between the 3 colors. The green is AK's olive green. The paint is thinned down with AK's acrylic thinner. The opacity of these AK colors is so great that even with thin layers I only needed 2 coats for a perfect color. After a few minutes I can carefully remove the masking putty. The putty can be reused later by kneading it until it has a uniform color again. I then repeat the whole masking process again, this time for the brown spots. The brown is AK's red brown, thinned again with acrylic thinner. You should make sure to spray from different angles, so as to not accidentally leave one side of the raised details unpainted. And this is the turret after painting. The masking worked great and I only have a little bit of overspray that I can easily fix. I also painted a few road wheels green and brown. Because the side skirts are not attached, I have to mask and paint them separately. I also chose to paint the barrel in a German grey that was used as a heat-resistant primer during World War II. I am painting the parts of the hull where the side skirts are missing in the German red primer. This would have been the color the tank was primed in the factory. The red looks really out of place right now, but will be toned down a lot after the weathering. The decals could be added without any varnish, since their positions on the tank are rather flat. Next up is chipping. For the base color, I mixed the dark yellow with sand beige. I then take a small piece of sponge and dip it into the paint. Wipe off the excess and then gently tap it all over the tank. You could do all of this with a brush, but it would take a lot more time. The sponge helps to create random patterns, to focus on the details that stick out and save you a lot of time. But you have to make sure to keep a minimal amount of paint on the sponge, otherwise your chips will be too big and look unrealistic. But I will still take a brush to connect a few chips into larger spots and also add some scratches. On the shell impacts, a lot of paint would have been chipped off. Now I have to fill the previously added chips with a darker color. In this case, German grey. This will help give the chips more texture. I only keep a thin line of the lighter yellow visible to highlight the edge. This will again take some time, but it will always be worth it in the end. All metal parts like the towing cables and tools are painted with a metallic silver as the base color. For the wooden parts, I chose AK's buff. The exhausts are painted in saddle brown. The outer parts of the road wheels that are in contact with the tracks are painted with Revell's Aqua Color steel. I also painted the visible interior parts white. The tracks are also primed in black. On top of that, I give them a base color of Vallejo's track primer. Make sure to get the tracks from all angles to avoid unpainted areas. Now I want to paint the areas that would be in contact with the ground. All I need for that is some metallic, a dry brush and a paper towel. I dip the brush into the paint and then load off most of it onto the paper towel, leaving only a small amount of paint on the brush. Then I simply drag the brush over the tracks, leaving paint only on the raised areas. Now I can take an enamel track wash to add some shadows. Before application, I cover the tracks in a gloss varnish. The spare tracks for the turret are instead covered in different rust tones using AK's weathering pencils. The colors are applied in decreasing order from dark to light. While those are drying, I can take a look at the figures. This is my first try to actually paint faces in a more realistic way. And let's see how this is going to turn out. First I primed the figures grey. Then I mixed some sand beige with sand brown for the base color of the skin. This color is then applied in 2 coats over the entire head. Next up, I made a red wash with highly diluted fire red from Vallejo. I then cover the entire head with it, and with an empty brush I can remove some of the excess. After drying, this gives the head a warmer tone and some basic shadows. All I have to do next is repaint the more exposed areas with a small brush. At first I used the same base color as before to relighten some areas. Then I took lighter and lighter skin tones, covering smaller areas each time. Up close this looks a little bit weird to be honest, but on the finished figures it should look better. Or so I hope. I did not try to paint the eyes, as that would have for sure ruined the figures even more. For the uniform, I used black-grey lightened with a small amount of old wood. The uniform as well as the details are then simply colored in. I tried to add some highlight onto the uniform by adding more old wood onto the black-grey, but it was not that visible on camera. And these are the finished figures. It would have probably been easier if I used higher quality figures, but these are the two that were included and they already had the right poses. Figure painting is definitely an area I still have a lot to learn and try. Let's get back to the tank. Now that I have finished the painting part using acrylics, I can use a gloss varnish to seal everything for the upcoming weathering effects. The weathering begins with a basic pin wash. For that I mix some Abteilung 502 brown wash oil color with white spirit. The wash is then applied over all details. It turned out lighter than I wanted, so I added some smoke oil paint into the mix to darken everything. After letting the wash dry for about 15 minutes, I take a cotton swab dipped in some white spirit to clean everything up. I just have to carefully swipe over the surface to remove the excess. I then use a brush for the finer and more precise details. Next up are the matte effects for the lower hull. For those I will be using MIG loose ground splashes. To get a fine splatter effect, I blow air with my airbrush onto a brush dipped in the matte effect. A few minutes later I drag the little drops down with a weathering brush. This will create the effect of mud stains running down the side of the hull. As most of this will be covered by the tracks, I just do very basic mud effects and won't waste much time here. This part may be better visible later due to the missing side skirts, that's why I added some more pronounced mud effects here. And this is the finished result. Now I can finally add the running gear to the lower hull. Due to the polycaps, I don't have to use glue and can just put them onto the axles. This also helps when adding the tracks, because the drive sprocket has to be in the right position for the track to fit. But with some wiggling, everything worked out. To give them the same base mud weathering like the lower hull, I am thinning some of the loose ground splashes with white spirit and apply it like a heavy wash over the tracks. The same goes for the road wheels, this time with the airbrush again. Finally it is time to add the side skirts. The easiest way for this is with super glue. The correct positioning is no problem due to the guides on the hull. These obviously need the same color of the basic matte effect like the rest. Here I need to increase the matte effects. The missing fender would result in a lot of mud being sprayed on the hull and even the turret. Next are the streaking effects with streaking grime, rain marks effects and dust and dirt, all from AK. I begin by adding streaks all over the vertical surfaces. After a few minutes of drying, I take a brush dampened in white spirit and blend everything together, dragging the streaks up and down. The same steps are repeated for the remaining 2 colors. The shiny metal parts all look factory new. To fix that, I add a thin layer of AK medium rust over all metal surfaces. To reduce the shiny look from the gloss varnish, I have to add a layer of matte varnish over everything. This will also seal in everything I have done so far and protect it again. Now I can add the heavier matte effects. To add volume, I use Vallejo's earth texture. I applied set texture over the lower plate. The acrylic-based matte effects from Vallejo and AK have a lot more volume than the expensive enamel-based products from Meng. That's why whenever I have to build up a larger accumulation of dirt, I begin with these products. Later on, I may modify the mod with the enamel products if I need to. But for that I will probably wait until I start building a diorama for this tank to better match the colors. A small amount of oil paint is blended into a fine grime effect with a dry brush. This will add some more color variation to the horizontal surfaces. Some details like the ammo belt for the machine gun need to be painted in brass. I also want to create some empty casings by painting a thin piece of metal and cutting it into smaller pieces later. I also want to add a few additional storage and equipment items. A hand grenade carrying case, some anti-tank mines, as well as some different jerry cans. These are all parts from Tamiya's accessory kits. All of them get painted in their base color with a brush. Then a light metal chipping from Rebel Aqua color is added. To add some contrast, I cover all items in a thin layer of rust wash. I attached a thread to the turret and threaded all the items onto it. Some of them are later fixed with superglue. The bucket gets filled with AK's puddle water, and then I add a few dead leaves into it. Here are some of the empty casings I painted earlier. I just dropped them onto the turret, but won't glue them for now. I will probably revisit this tank again when I get around to building a diorama for it. That's all, let's take a look at the final result. The King Tiger is finally finished and I have to say I am very pleased with the result. The kit was a lot of fun to make and I can only recommend it. If you also enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you don't want to miss any future uploads, subscribe to my channel. If you have any feedback or suggestions, let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.